How are you? How many of you, this is your first time being at Mods? Welcome. That's awesome. How many have been here a year already? 2 years? 3 years? More than 3 years? I've been here 3 years, and I'm really glad to be back. Yesterday, somebody tweeted that I'd be back for the third year, and a friend of mine saw this tweet in Switzerland and said he was here 4 years ago. And that's part of what I'm talking about now is the power of our writing. Someone I haven't seen in years from Switzerland saw someone else's tweet that I was going to be here today. So I've been thinking a lot about Swift these past couple of years and what's been changing in the iOS world, and our coding changes all the time. There's new frameworks, there's new APIs, no matter what you're writing for. But on the other hand, writing doesn't change very much. When there's a change in the way we write, and I mean write prose, write text, when there's something that changes in the way we write, that's a big change. So I want to look at some of the truths, some of the traditions from writing, and see what we can bring back to the way we write code. And one of the biggest changes in writing happened during this period a long time ago. And this was where the way we wrote, in this case it was Latin, but a lot of the things that we write today changed in those days, and it came down to something very similar to something dear to my heart. I'm a mathematician by training, and the invention of the number 0 was really important for math. It meant that we could express things we could never express before. And in that period, between 1100 and 1400, something similar happened in writing. Writing used to look like this. It was very hard to read. And sometimes they would leave little marks in between that would say, here's where you're supposed to break the words. But they took Latin to a country that didn't speak Latin, and they had to make it easier for them to read it, and that's when they invented the space between the words. And that was a huge change in writing. We can now read this more clearly. We could read to ourselves, which had never been done before. It was always someone reading to you, someone telling a story to you. So this was a huge innovation in writing, and we don't get many of those. So not long ago, I said we're moving from Objective-C in the iOS world to Swift. Some people are embracing it. Some people are fighting it. And someone posted on Twitter a while ago that Objective-C is like a sonnet. So here's some Objective-C code. How many of you come from Java? C#? Ruby? How many of you come from Objective-C? Good. You can explain this to everyone else. Objective-C is famously wordy, but it's famously readable, and so here's a method that helps you record a failure with a description, and we tell you what file it's in, we tell you what line we're talking about, and then we give you a chance to return a Boolean as, do we expect this to go badly or don't we? And so Objective-C is like a sonnet. It's very wordy, very expressive. But if Objective-C is like a sonnet, what's Swift like? And this woman tweeting said, Swift is a haiku. And so I found some Swift code that to me looks like a haiku. Kind of compressed, kind of unreadable, kind of mysterious. We've got generics in here, these angle brackets, which you have in many of your languages as well. We've got this argument, which is a function that takes one function to another function, and it returns yet another function. Oh my gosh, thank goodness this is not a technical talk this morning. Not before the coffee break anyway. And then there's this $0. $0 is the placeholder for the first parameter we pass into a function. And so the rest of her tweet was, if Objective-C is a sonnet and Swift is a haiku, well, this is what $0 is. And this is from Erica Sadoun, who writes a lot about iOS programming. She's got a new book about playgrounds. So let's look at haiku. Here's a very famous and old haiku. This is by the master Basho. And I got to tell you, I read this and I didn't understand this. And so I called up my friend Josh Smith, who will be speaking later today, because he understands stuff like this. And I said, well, what does it mean? And he said, it's obvious. Even the monkey needs a raincoat. Now it's completely clear. So there are haikus, there are short poems about shorter subjects. In the U.S., coming up at the end of the month, little kids will dress up as cartoon characters and movie characters and roles or famous people, and they'll go from house to house asking for food, for treats. And so someone wrote this haiku. Very short, very sweet, a little bit more readable than that Swift. Here's one that's on a more serious note. And this one shows that you can be moving. I mean, we've had challenges. How many of you are on Twitter? So you know it's cheating in Twitter if you take like 5 tweets to say what you mean. You want to get it down to that 140 characters. Well, look at how much is conveyed in this short, beautiful haiku. And it just unfolds as someone turns off their phone. Just beautiful. A son has gone to the house where his now dead mother has lived to empty it out and to take out the contents of her life, expressed in so few characters. Powerful writing, just like your code. Now, it might be unfair because, this is what I do. But it's not just that I write for a living. Actually, whether you know it or not, you write for a living. You are a professional writer. And the writing that you do is some of the most important activities you participate in every day. And we're going to talk about some of what you do. And as you think about what it means to write for a living, how you can benefit from it. Because not only do you write, you convince other people. You write emails, you write commit messages, you write blog posts, you write notes to someone saying, here's what I need to have added to our framework. You tell stories. And so, to benefit you, we can look at some of the lessons that we get from traditional writing. Now, I'd like to say there are no tricks, but it turns out there are. And so I want to open with a video from magicians Penn and Teller. This is them doing their very famous, that everyone does, cups and balls trick.
Totally American and totally disposable cups and balls. Goes like this. We take the ball, we place it in our hand, we vanish it, it appears underneath the cup. That's the way it's done all around the world. You take the ball, you place it in your hand, you vanish it, and it appears underneath the cup. Here's a little variation Teller came up with, where he takes the ball, places it in his hand, then shows you underneath the cup, yet it still appears underneath the cup. Now we're all set up here. We got the 3 cups, 3 balls. You take the center ball, place it in the center cup, the 2 side balls. We put them away, and they still regroup underneath the center cup. These 3 balls, I come over here for just a moment, and then a giant ball appears in the center cup. 1 more on either side, and of course, for the finish, it's an American baseball.
Now, it turns out, if we show you how to do that trick, it'll still be a great trick. And at the end of this talk, we're going to show you exactly how this trick is done. But the first thing you need to think about is your imagination. You're telling stories, you're communicating with people. And here's a wonderful quote that stories of the imagination tend to upset those that don't have one. So it's not about jokes. It's not about me or I. I used to work in radio as a DJ, and I had a boss who just hated when we told jokes because he'd say, someone's coming in and they don't have the same context as you. They don't know what's funny to you is funny to them. And if you talk about you instead of your audience, you're not reaching them. So what you have to remember as you communicate is that if there's a way that you can be misunderstood, someone's going to misunderstand you. They're going to think that you were insulting in some way. So here's someone that thought they had a very clear poster, and someone misunderstood him and said, clearly in this hotel, wheelchairs can only move backwards. So here's some lessons from Elmore Leonard, who's a famous author, who wrote down 10 lessons about writing. His first lesson was, never open a book with the weather. No one cares. His second rule was, avoid prologues. It works with talks too. Don't come on stage and tell me for 10 minutes who you are, what you do, why we Just get to what you're going to tell me. And then much later, his 10th rule was, leave out the part that readers skip. They're not with you anyway. I mean, Moby Dick could have been 50 pages long. So leave out the part that readers skip. So if we're going to tell a story, we need two things. The first thing we need is we need a story to tell, and the second thing we need is we need a good way to tell it. And there's a classical device that's been used in literature for thousands of years, and this goes back to mythology, Western mythology, and it's the hero's journey. And so we begin our story, and the hero is going about their business in their ordinary world, and then something happens. There's a call to adventure. And they resist it. They don't want to participate in this adventure. Maybe it's a traditional story, maybe it's a more modern story. Movies are told this way. And then, after they said, no, this isn't for me, they meet their mentor. They meet their Merlin, their Dumbledore, whoever's going to lead them around. Well, in your stories, you're the mentor. You're the one leading the reader around. You're the one telling them how they can benefit. So now, you've met your mentor, and the mentor helps you cross the threshold into the magical world. You've gone from your ordinary world to your magical world, and you encounter tests, and you encounter challenges that you couldn't imagine, and you get bigger and bigger and bigger weapons and techniques to meet these challenges. And then at the end, once you become a stronger, more clever, better person, now it's time for you to go back to your ordinary world, but you aren't the same anymore. And this is a classical story that goes back a long time. So this is the hero's journey. It's a classic shape. Here from the TED Talks is Andrew Stanton talking about why stories are so important to us anyway.
Storytelling is joke telling. It's knowing your punchline, your ending, knowing that everything you're saying from the first sentence to the last is leading to a singular goal, and ideally confirming some truth that deepens our understandings of who we are as human beings. We all love stories. We're born for them. Stories affirm who we are. We all want affirmations that our lives have meaning. And nothing does a greater affirmation than when we connect through stories. It can cross the barriers of time, past, present, and future, and allow us to experience the similarities between ourselves and through others, real and imagined.
Stories are important. So you've got a story you want to tell. What does your story look like? It might be the hero's journey. It turns out a very famous author, Kurt Vonnegut, talked about what shape your story might take.
This is the GI axis, good fortune, ill fortune. Sickness and poverty down here, wealth and boisterous good health up there. Here's the very middle. Now, this is the BE axis. B stands for beginning. E stands for electricity. Now, this is an exercise in relativity, really, is the shape of the curves of what matters and not their origins. So we'll start a little above average, is why get a depressing person? We'll start... The whole thing, we call this story Man in Hole, but it needn't be about a man, and it needn't be about somebody getting into a hole. But it's just a good way to remember it. Somebody gets into trouble, gets out of it again. People love that story. They never get sick of it. All right, not copyrighted. Another story, also a beautiful curve and easily fed into a computer, called Boy Gets Girl, but it needn't be that. Just a way to remember it. Start on an average day, average person, not expecting anything to happen a day like any other. Find something wonderful, just loves it. Oh, God damn it. Got it back again. People like that. Now, These are beautiful curves, and this gets a little complicated. Computers can now play chess, so I don't know why they can't digest this very difficult curve I'm going to draw for you now. And it so happens that this is the most popular story in our civilization, Western civilization. As we love to hear this story, every time it's retold, somebody makes another $1 million. You're welcome to do it. Now, surprisingly enough, I've said it's depressing. You know, people don't like stories about below average days and people. But we're going to start way down here. Worse than that, who is so low? It's a little girl. What's happened? Her mother has died. Her father has remarried a vile-tempered, ugly woman with two nasty daughters, big daughters. You've heard it. See? Anyway, there's a party at the palace that night. She can't go. She has to help everybody else get ready. She has to stay home. Now, does she sink lower? No. She's a staunch little girl, and she has had the maximum whack from fate, which is the loss of her mother. She can't go any lower than that. Okay, so the fairy godmother comes. Gives her shoes, gives her stocking, gives her mascara. Gives her a means of transportation. Goes to the party, dances with the prince, has a swell time. Boring, 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 boring. Now there's a slight inclination to that line as I've drawn it because it takes perhaps 20 seconds, 30 seconds for a grandfather clock to strike 12. Does she wind up at the same level? Of course not. She will remember that dance for the rest of her life. Now, she poops along on this level till the prince comes, the shoe fits. She achieves off-scale happiness.
That's Kurt Vonnegut. So, Andrew Stanton, Kurt Vonnegut, Elmore Leonard, these are masterful storytellers. And in a way, I find their example inspiring. It's a little depressing. I'm not going to be able to tell stories like they tell stories. So even though I write for a living, I think more broadly what that means. If I'm not going to be Stanton and I'm not going to be Vonnegut, what's the skill that I bring? And it turns out my skill is that I write quickly and I write cleanly. And that's something that you need to develop too. It's very important that you can write quickly and you can express yourself so that there's no ambiguity in what you mean. Now, there's many things I wish I could do, and one of them is I wish I could draw. I can't draw. I've tried, I've read books, I've taken classes. I can't draw. I draw like a 3-year-old child with a shaky hand. So here's a drawing I did recently of someone that I speak with, and I thought I captured her essence here. Now, here is what she looks like speaking. That's the person that I was drawing. She has long hair, long limbs, she's gesturing all the time, and I thought that's who I captured in my image. The two most important things that I captured in this image were her hair and her arms outstretched. And then I saw her speak. And in her talk, she draws an image of herself. And here's what she draws herself looking like. And when she does this and she's telling a story about herself, I look at this and say, well, that's her. So it turns out you don't need to hold yourself to as high a standard as you might have thought. You need to be completely clear and expressive. And this is completely clear and expressive in the context where she's telling about jobs she had when she was a dishwasher, when she was a production assistant. And you might objectively look and say, well, as bad as my picture is, it captures more of her than this one, but it doesn't. So when you think about how good you need to be, it's a hard question. Often it's how good you want to be. So the guy who draws the Dilbert cartoon talked about what you need to do if you just want to have an average, successful life, and it turns out if you just want to be average, that's all you aspire to be, that turns out not to be so hard. You know, you stay out of trouble, you go to school, basically, you show up. And if you do that, you'll have an average, successful life. But most of us in this room don't want to be average. We want to achieve something that matters to somebody. We want to change people's lives. So if you want to be extraordinary, what is it you need to do? See, I can draw awesomely. That's supposed to be a finish line. There's a couple kinds of races in life. There's a couple kinds of contests. In one type of contest, all we care is that you finished. And me finishing doesn't mean you can't finish. We can all succeed together. And then there's other types of contests where we rank people. And there's a first, there's a second, there's a third. And so the first thing you have to understand is, which sort of contest are you in? Are you in one that's binary, you either succeed or fail, or you're in one that's ranked? And then you ask, when are you a success? Are you a success when you're at least as good as 75% of the population? 90%? 95%? When are you a success? So in the U.S., there's a lot of talk about the golfer Tiger Woods. How horrible he's doing, how bad he is, his career's over. Tiger Woods is in this percentile. He's better than this many people. Of the 60 million plus people who play golf every year, he's ranked 241. And yet, if you ask people, he's a failure. That's a hard scale. Think about what scale you're measuring yourself against, and are you being fair to yourself? Now, whether he's a success or a failure actually is in his own head. And so much of how you figure you're doing in life isn't based on what a manager says or a coworker says. It's you looking and thinking, it's garbage. It's not good. It's calling yourself a failure. There's this feedback loop where we think we're not doing well, so we do worse. And it just spins till it gets out of control. I used to be a college professor, and one of the classes I taught was freshman calculus. And we would have kids every once in a while who would cheat on a quiz. And the faculty members would get so upset because they'd say, well, if they'll cheat on something that is only a quiz, they're headed for a life of crime. It's only a quiz in first semester calculus. Where is this going to lead? But it's not only a quiz. To that student who cheated, putting ourselves in their head, looking at that student with empathy, it's not just a quiz. In their head, if they do badly on that quiz, they don't graduate, they don't go on to medical school, their whole life is ruined. For us, we look at it and it's only a quiz. For us, we look at Tiger Woods and he's better than 60 million golfers. But in their head, so you've got to make sure that you're judging yourself fairly, that you're seeing your own successes. It's really hard. I teach a lot of classes, and I look at the evaluations, and I ignore all the good ones. I only read the ones that are bad. It's in my head. Here's an amazing story of someone who came in last place but is a success. This person came in last out of 30,000 people. 30,000 people started the Boston Marathon last year, and this man with severe physical problems finished the race 14 hours after everybody else. It took him a day to finish the race. And yet, as he crosses that finish line, surrounded by people that walked with him for those 30 hours, here's a man who came in last who's a complete success. So a lot of it's in our head. What a failure. We try things. We do things. That's how we succeed.
Hey, big guy. I heard you lost a close one today.
Thanks, Flo.
Hey, let's go get you an ice cream cone, champ.
The sprinkles?
Sprinkles are for winners.
I understand.
We don't soften it when someone fails. They don't get sprinkles, but they do get the ice cream cone. Hey, look, Swift code. This must be a technical talk. Okay. So, back to Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert. He told you if you want to be average, you go to school, you find a job, you show up. But if you want something extraordinary, there are two ways you can go about it. Way one is you can become the best at something. You can become better than 95% of people, and you will succeed. Or, and this is the way I live my life, you become very good at two or more things. So his example was, he writes his cartoon Dilbert. He's not the best artist in the world. He's not the best joke teller in the world, but he's pretty good at telling jokes. He's pretty good at drawing. You put those together, and he's a very successful cartoonist. So finding more than one thing that you're good at is very important. And my suggestion to you today is that one of those things that you make sure you're good at is writing. It will propel you in your career. Think of the things that you do every day that you write in your job. You write code, sure, but you also send email, release notes, commit messages, proposals. You're convincing people in your writing. There's a guy in the States who goes by the name Rands, and he talks a lot about email and what you need to do to send a successful email. And let's just say I spent some time working at a company that produces nice things that I get to code in. And my first week there, a guy took me aside and said, I hate your email. Your subject messages aren't clear enough. And I'm not going to read any of your email till you send it the way I want to receive it. And that's Michael Lopp, Rands' first suggestion. Your subject has to be completely clear. Your subject isn't follow-up. Your subject isn't, hey. Your subject is completely clear. You're telling them why they're going to read your message. If you look at your subject line, and your subject line is descriptive, relevant, amusing, poetic, but it's clear what your message is about, people will read it. So once you have a good subject line, you're going to want a strong beginning. So let's go back to Andrew Stanton and see what he says about a strong beginning.
What this scene is doing, and it did in the book, is it's fundamentally making a promise. It's making a promise to you that this story will lead somewhere that's worth your time. And that's what all good stories should do at the beginning, is they should give you a promise. You could do it in an infinite amount of ways. Sometimes it's as simple as once upon a time. These Carter books always had Edgar Rice Burroughs as a narrator in it, and I always thought it was such a fantastic device. It's like a guy inviting you around the campfire, or somebody in a bar saying, here, let me tell you a story. It didn't happen to me, it happened to somebody else, but it's going to be worth your time. A well-told promise is like a pebble being pulled back in a slingshot and propels you forward through the story to the end.
I love that. You're setting it up, and now you have to think as you draw that pebble back, what's the range of your slingshot? How far is this going to propel you? What's the story you're telling? So Lopp says you've got your email, you've got your strong subject matter. Make sure that your email is no more than 3 or 4 paragraphs. You know when you open that email and it's like this, and you go, yeah, I'll read it some other time, and you never do? Short. The other thing is you're writing an email, and you're ranting about, oh my gosh, they've done everything stupid, I don't know why they chose this, and you realize about halfway through, you don't want to send this email. You're just feeling better writing all these things that you hate down. So you've got to know when the email you're writing is for you and not for the person you're sending it to. And here's a little pro tip. When you write an email, don't put the person's address in because you might send it by accident. Write the email first And then when you've decided you're sending it, then put their address in it. So now your email is getting longer and longer, and the standards that you hold yourself to must get higher as you get longer and longer. If you're adding to this email, there must be a really good reason that you're adding yet another paragraph. And now you look back and you say, okay, wait a minute, that's an odd thing anyway. Look back at an email, reread it before I send it? Yes. It could make or break your day, your week, your career. Think carefully before you send something. Have you made it clear what it is you're saying? And have you made it clear how it's important to the person you're sending it to? So many people in my country send notes to their boss or their organization about why they need more money. Their house payment went up, the groceries cost more. That means nothing to their boss. What have I done in the last year that makes me more valuable to you? So you're putting it in terms of the person you're writing to. Now I want to bring back Penn and Teller, the magicians who did the cup and balls trick. And this is an amazing trick because this trick takes place in two different locations. There's the trick that you're going to see, and there's the trick that the person on stage is experiencing. And you will have more fun if you try to see this trick from the point of view of the person on stage.
Yeah, but during this bit, we're going to ask you to close your eyes a few times. And some of those times, to make sure you keep your eyes shut, we're going to put our fingertips on your eyelids. Is that too creepy for you?
No.
It's certainly creepy, just not too creepy, right? Yeah. Well, let's give it a try. Face front, and just close your eyes. We'll put our fingertips just like that. Is that too creepy?
No,
Yeah, it's creepy. Yeah, it's creepy. You can open your eyes there.
Minimally.
You can open your eyes there, Michelle. And Michelle, when I say close your eyes, I suggest you do it right away because we're coming in.
Okay.
And if you don't, it turns into a Three Stooges routine, and you're standing right in the great Curly Howard spot there. Now, this trick is going to happen. There'll be no more magic. We're not going to do any more magic for you. The only magic in this room will happen inside Michelle's head. So please, all of you, try to watch the next few tricks from right inside Michelle's head, okay? I want you to examine this ring. Just make sure it's a solid ring there. You can just kind of monkey around with it a little bit. And then just so you know where it is, put it right around my neck. Would you please just put the ring right around it? Yeah, right around my neck there, so you know right where it is. Now face the audience. Now we're going to start monkeying with you, Michelle. Put your hands out just like this so they're touching, just like that, okay, Michelle? We're going to rub our fingers right down your arms just like that. So you know just where you are. Okay? Now close your eyes, Michelle, close your eyes. One fingertip on each eyelid, one fingertip on the back of each hand. Now, Michelle, you can feel our fingertips on the back of your hands. Toes on the back of your right hand. I'm right over here on your left, Michelle, okay? So, Michelle, I want you to imagine our fingertips touching the backs of your hands. Imagine our hands. Imagine our wrists. Then just reach out and hold our wrists. Hold Teller with your right hand, me with your left. Hold our wrists. And get a good grip, nice and strong, but leave your elbows loose so we can move around a little bit. Now, Michelle, you can be able to imagine this really easily. Be able to hear it and feel it. Be able to hear and feel Teller reaching across. He's grabbing the ring that put around my neck, okay? I want you to imagine this next thing, Michelle. It's impossible, but I still want you to imagine it. Okay. I want you to imagine that Teller rips the ring through my neck, which you're going to do in just a moment, and then links it onto this arm. Now, this is impossible, okay? It's physically impossible to rip the ring through my neck. It's biologically impossible. And it's topologically impossible to link it onto this arm as long as you keep holding this wrist. Okay, Michelle? So it's impossible, but imagine it. Imagine he rips the ring through my neck and links it onto your arm. Feel that, Michelle? You can open your eyes there, Michelle. Open your eyes. Is that solid there, Michelle? Totally solid? Totally unbroken?
Yes.
It's going to get a little weirder, Michelle.
There are two tricks going on here. There's the one in Michelle's head, and there's the one in our head where we realize that ring had moved from around his neck quite a while ago. And it turns out it's not just Michelle and you that are appreciating tricks. This happens in everything we write. This happens in everything we write. And so if you think of it as a writer, we often have two audiences. And this is just a metaphor with Michelle and you, but it happens when we see a presentation. So Apple gives a presentation each year at WWDC, and the opening keynote is available for everybody to see. We can all watch the videos and see the new things announced by Apple. And then they send the media away, and they do the rest of the conference just for us developers. Okay? No more for the public. But for this opening keynote, it's not for the 5,000 developers in the audience. or the other thousands watching at home. It's for the millions and millions of customers and analysts and business people who have something to do with Apple. And every year, developers watch this and they whine because they don't think it's for them. And they don't realize that Apple has two audiences. And so people watched the keynote this year and they all cried because the last half hour was about Apple Music, because that was Apple's new initiative. And people said, oh, it was horrible. There was nothing for developers at this conference this year. It was all just for the media. And they forget, because they think it's all about them, they forget that this keynote is for a wider audience, and we're just this tiny little piece here. But when you stop whining, you realize that there are announcements. And developers wrote everywhere, there were no hardware announcements at the conference. And I said, oh, actually, yes, there were. You just had to listen carefully. Apple announced that there were new drawing APIs, and that when you drew on the screen of an iPad, it would actually record your movements faster than the cycles tended to have done in the past. There was iPad-only APIs for doing multitasking. There was a new news app that was targeted for the iPad. And if you listened, you said, there's a new iPad coming. There's a new iPad coming that's going to support drawing on it in a new way. And sure enough, months later, they released a new iPad with a pencil that we're going to be able to see in November, that you're going to be able to draw on the iPad. So there were hardware announcements. We were just too busy whining that we didn't see them. They added new game APIs. You were able to play a game and not download the whole game. As you finished a level, the next level would download. Well, that does me no good on my phone, on my tablet, when I might be off the network, but on a TV device that's always connected. So this turned out to be an announcement of the new Apple TV. You just had to listen through the noise. So there are two audiences often, and you've got to listen when they're not talking to you to hear, what's the part that matters to me? This happens when we present. This happens when we write. This happens when we code. When we code, we have two audiences. And unfortunately, there are some programmers in this room who only pay attention to one of the audiences. Some of you only care about this audience being happy. But you write for other programmers. You write for other developers. And so the writing you do, even when you code, is for two audiences, and both of them are equally important. Don't make me look at the stuff you wrote for the compiler and try to figure out if there's a new Apple TV coming. So there are two audiences. Someone wrote a blog post where he said, nonsense, I only have to worry about the compiler. Now, I will tell you, that's not actually the language he used, but I don't use language like that on stage. And he wrote this blog post about the judicious use of bad code, saying, you know what? If my app works, what do I care if the code is good or bad? If my app works, why does it matter to me? And he was quite proud of this. Very disturbing. He says, well, if we had time to write code correctly, but what percentage of your time are you going in and reading code, and what percent are you writing code? Take the time when you write your code, because you're going to be reading it for a long time. He's writing for one audience. Maybe it's his own project. He doesn't have other developers working with him. You've got to care more than just that the app doesn't crash. So he says, don't waste time writing it nicely. Don't worry about it. I say nonsense. There are two audiences, whether you're a novelist or a coder. Whether you're a poet, whether you're a developer, there are two audiences. So let's go back to our magic trick.
Totally solid? Totally unbroken?
Yes.
It's going to get a little weirder, Michelle. It's going to get a little weirder, Michelle, okay? Here we go again, Michelle. Close your eyes, Michelle. Close your eyes. Now you got You got one fingertip on each eye. We're holding one of each of your hands. Now, Michelle, take your right hand, reach across and grab the ring, and slide it off your arm there, Michelle. Now, I'm not going to let go of your arm for even a second. Hold it tightly. Now, Michelle, bring that ring above your left arm and tap it right above the elbow, and tap it a couple times above your left arm. Bring it above your left, just tap it, yeah. You can bend this elbow a little bit, yeah. Don't be so rigid. Okay, now it's really easy to imagine that ring, isn't it? Because you're holding it and you're also tapping it against your arm.
Right.
Now raise it a few inches above your arm and hold it there. Now in just a moment, Michelle, I'm going to count to 3. Right after I count to 3, right on the next beat, I want you to let go of that ring. Let it fall completely. It's going to feel weird, Michelle, because you're going to expect that ring to hit this arm, but it won't.
Okay.
Instead, imagine this, Michelle. The bottom of the ring will open up, it'll suck this arm in, and then it'll heal up. When you drop that ring, you will link it onto this arm without me letting go of this wrist. And if you people can watch this from inside Michelle's head, this may be the biggest miracle you experience tonight. You're going to drop it right after 3, Michelle. Ready? And 1, 2, 3, drop. Feel that, Michelle? Feel that, Michelle?
Yes. Yeah.
Open your eyes there, Michelle. Open your eyes. Is that solid there, Michelle? Totally unbroken, Michelle? Face the audience, Michelle. One more, Michelle, one more. Close your eyes there, Michelle, close your eyes. Take the ring in both hands there, Michelle. Take the ring in both hands. Get a sense of it there, Michelle. Just hold it right there. Now, Michelle, keep holding the ring with your right hand. Let go with your left hand. And bring your hand up and cover your own eyes with your hand. No, with your left hand, yeah. Cover your own, replace our fingers there, yeah. Now, you've created a solid ring of flesh from your face to your hand, to your wrist, to your arm, to your elbow, to your arm, to your neck, to your face. It's a solid ring. There's no way we could link anything onto this arm while this hand is against this face. Is that right, Michelle? Michelle may have the ring. Now imagine this, Michelle. 1, 2, 3. Feel that, Michelle? Open your eyes there, Michelle. Open your eyes. You have a sense of where I am? Sense of where Teller is?
2 audiences. So back to our haiku with Swift. I'm going to write a little Swift code now. Don't panic. And in my code, I've got an array of strings. I want to convert these strings into URLs. And we do this the way we do it in many languages. We first have to do something to convert it into www.apple.com and put an HTTP up front and make from that URL string, we'll just do it like this. Oh my goodness, that's unreadable. I mean, the code's right. Well, it turns out we can space it in Swift like this. You can go to a new line with the dots. I'm not liking that a whole lot more. We've got the map, we've got the filter. We can space it a little bit more and drop that $0 and specify that first I'm going to map the company name to this string, and then I'm going to map that resulting string to a URL. I'm going to make sure that the URL is non-nil. If it is, I'll filter it out. If it is non-nil, then I will go ahead and find my URL, make my URL request, and so on. It's okay, but I would prefer that we remember what we learned about emails and stories, that we start strong, we start with something clear, and then we have our paragraphs. So here are our paragraphs. Our paragraphs are these functions, and these functions are cohesive. They do one thing. When I look at the function named toURL string from company name, I give it a company name, and I get back a URL string. It does one thing. And now that I've got these functions, I can now use these functions in place and say, first I want to map to URL string from company name, then I want to map to URL from, oh my gosh, it almost reads like English. It almost reads like it's describing what it does. We're writing our code like pros. We're communicating with other people. The first one that looked horrible and compact and no spacing, that compiled fine. But every time I get code like that, it's going to take me a long time to figure out what it's doing. This is my opening paragraph that says, here's what I'm going to tell you in this email. And now if I need to know what does it take to do this, I go to that function and I read. We're communicating with other people. You write for a living. We have our subject, and then we have our message body. You write for a living. So we've learned some lessons for our coding that came from writing, and we still do writing, our emails and our commit notes and all that. We write clear and clean. We're brief. We know our story. We know what we're communicating. We capture its essence and we share it with others. We know our audience says more than one audience. Multiple people might be coming to our code. Forget this advice about speaking to people. It's creepy. You are a professional writer, and that means you have to write professionally. Now, there's a wonderful quote that goes back to Orson Welles that says, if you want a happy ending, I mean, you're writing the story. If you want a happy ending, it depends, of course, on where you end your story. You get to decide where your story ends. So, where does our story end? In Swift, we have this unfortunate character, the bang. And the bang is used when we have something that might be nil or not. And we want to say, yeah, let's just assume it's not nil. Let's just force it to be whatever I think it is. And so sometimes it crashes. And that makes us sad. Now, exclamation points or bangs are appropriate for tweets. They're appropriate for little greetings in Facebook or notes to friends. They are not appropriate for professional writing. An exclamation mark is like laughing at your own joke. That's in prose. In code, it's so dangerous in Swift. Try says, I've got a function that could throw something. It's not going to throw something. Let's just assume it's going to work. As, I'm going to cast to something. It'll just work. I'm okay. I've got an optional that I'm going to unwrap. Anytime I see an exclamation point in someone's Swift code, they're assuming a happy ending and they're not guaranteeing it. It's a force unwrap. We don't need to do this if we're clear, if we're transparent. But even if we're transparent, even if I show you how a trick is done, so you saw how Michelle's trick was done, I want to go back to that first trick we saw of Penn and Teller and show you how they did their cups and balls trick. And even after you see it, it's still entertaining and mysterious. They're going to do this trick with transparent cups so you can see everything.
Now, after doing the American cups and balls for a while, we wanted to kind of zoom in and do a Penn and Teller cups and balls, which involves breaking a few rules of magic. Now, the first rule of magic is you never do the same trick twice. So we're going to do the same trick twice. Second rule of magic is you never tell an audience how a trick is being done. So we're going to tell you exactly how the trick is being done. The third rule of magic is you never let the audience see your secret preparation. They must not know what is hidden in which pocket. And the fourth rule of magic is unwritten, but we think any magician in the world would agree with us in a second, that you never, ever do the cups and balls with clear plastic cups. So here's the Penn and Teller version of the cups and balls. We did the first ball, pretend to place in our hand, have already snuck underneath the first cup. To the second ball, simultaneously secrete it beneath the cup, place in our hand and show it. To the third and final ball, pretend to place in our hand, pretend to show it in the cup, place it in the cup, then secretly secrete it and reveal it. Now we're all set for the second half, 3 cups all loaded, 3 balls on top. Center ball, center cup. These are the side balls where you put them away, we don't need more. We have 3 duplicates underneath here. These 3 balls, this is not juggling. This is called misdirection. Boy, look over here, tells you his final ball under, 1 more to the side. And of course, for the finish, it's an American baseball right there. It's an American baseball. That's a Penn and Teller cups and balls.
So, even though I've shown you the tricks of writing, There's still a lot of mystery to it, a lot of things for you to work on. I look forward to what you do. Thank you.